Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SWPPPP Radio with WGR Southwest. I am Matt Lewis, your host, and I'm here again today with John Teravskis.
Hey, everyone.
All right, so John, we have a unique episode of SWPPPP Radio today.
Yes, we do, and I am really looking forward to this. This is going to be really cool. We're going to have our studio audience. We don't normally have a studio audience. Usually it's just you and I in this room doing our thing. And so it's really nice to have people, and hopefully just like a talk radio show, you and I can get them engaged as we move on into the topic. But we've had some fun this week, haven't we?
Yeah. Yesterday I was out in Monterey County doing a presentation for a lot of the municipal guys and gals out there, just talking about the 5 EMP categories and trying to get them prepped for the incoming storm season and, all that.
Yeah, you had contractors, you had municipal inspectors, and in fact, that's why we do it the last week of September, is because the rain's about to begin. And so we want people being aware of stormwater.
Boy, do we.
And yeah, we've had some awesome discussions and presentations this week on different aspects of the stormwater industry, not just construction, but we've had municipal presentations, we've had industrial, we've had stormwater quality. We've had other consultants giving talks, the water board, regional boards, EMP manufacturers, even street sweepers. It's been really a good week of education.
Yeah, it has. And we've had over 4,000 registrants.
Yeah, can you believe that? Yeah. Just this morning, we bypassed 4,000 registrants.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
And they're telling me, they're crunching the numbers, but they're telling me over 900 unique individuals.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been great. And these the Stormwater Awareness Week goes back. This is our 12th year, and so it goes back some time. And the whole reason we started this event was it came right out of the Great Recession. 2007, 2008. We weren't too many years beyond that, and a lot of people didn't have money for training, especially municipalities. They didn't have a training budget, and so we're like, the stormwater industry should be able to train itself. We shouldn't have to go spend big bucks to get good education. And so we reached out to colleagues and agencies and individuals like you and said, what about for a week we just set aside our differences, our competition, and how about we just, provide some good education? This has been great.
Yeah, it has been great. People have stepped up, and it seems like the industry wants the same thing, wants a ongoing collaboration between us.
Yeah, and it, we had to get the word out, in those early days, and so we had some fun. The other thing is we also thought, the week should be fun, and so yes, we have a lot of good, serious education that's happening. But occasionally we'll do fun things like this workshop, or yesterday I was talking about creative PDHs.
Yeah.
We've also had some fun over the years putting together promo films. This year the theme was the voice of stormwater. You are the voice of stormwater.
Right.
And if our viewers who are watching right now, if they haven't checked out our website and seen the voices of stormwater, you got to do it. It's pretty amazing. David Franklin, he's going to be one of our presenters later today, but he gave a very unique one. He's literally the voice of stormwater. I won't spoil it for you, but you got to check that one out, that little clip under voice of stormwater. And then we had a storm drain.
Hi, my name is Willie Granwell.
Actually, the voice of stormwater. So yeah, we've had some fun doing these over the years.
Yeah.
I think one of our highlights that we did, this was 2014. So I think it was our second or third year into it. And our production team always wanted to make a spaghetti western. The good, bad, and the ugly, right? Who's your favorite cowboy, Matt?
Oh, anything Clint Eastwood. Yes, I mean, that's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking.
Or
right?
Doc Holliday or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking, right? And so we had a lot of fun doing this. And in fact, just this year, just some sad news. We lost a good colleague of ours who was truly a voice of Stormwater. That's Kevin Harcourt.
Yeah.
And he's featured in this video clip we're going to show. He was actually the bad guy. He's nothing. He's nothing. He's not a bad guy, but he was actually the bad guy. He was representing big stormwater business.
Right.
And so they had, of course, a showdown. You can't have a Western without a showdown. So hey, check this clip out. Let's take a look at this.
Ladies and gentlemen, come over here and gather around right here. I got something to tell you about the best education that's coming your way. This stormwater education is one of a kind, state of the art. It's the best across the nation. It only costs $500. $500 today only. This is
Well, that
for
doesn't
you.
sound like rock bottom pricing to me, does it? You?
No, my company can never send me at that price.
Hey, I can't afford that.
$500? My company would never send me at that price.
You could get your ticket today. I'll accept silver, gold, whatever you got. Just come over here and talk to me right now.
Not even bankers can afford that. You're gonna have to cut me a deal.
You know, folks, it's required by law. And who are you gonna go with anyway if you don't go with us?
You know, there's other options. Stormwater education doesn't have to be big business. If you're tired of spending your hard-earned cash on stormwater conferences, why don't you come on up and join us for Stormwater Awareness Week, where we're gonna have a week of free stormwater workshops all over the state of California. During that week, we're gonna have some hands-on training, so if you're tired of sitting in that conference room, you ought to get on up and come on out here and join us for some practical application. Don't forget, Stormwater Awareness Week, September 22nd through the 26th, 2014.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Pretty good to me. That sounds all right, huh?
Yeah, hey, count me in.
Pretty good. Good. Yeah, that's me in.
Yeah,
me too.
I can go at that price.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, Matt. We got some characters in there. You know, Kevin Harcourt, he was the bad guy, and he was truly a voice of stormwater. He did a lot of our early Stormwater Awareness Week workshops. The sheriff in there, who's that? He's someone special to you.
That's my dad, my old man.
Yeah, and he's also our head QSP here, our lead, our QSP lead.
Yeah.
He was sheriff. He doesn't talk funny like that, does he?
He will try to shoot you if you get out of line, though. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it.
Yeah. And then he and Kevin actually were quite the duo here at WGR. With some of the stormwater education that we did in the early days, they would do all sorts of crazy, innovative things. One of the things they did was they went out to Home Depot over here and worked with the Home Depot staff to say, hey, can we put on a stormwater education workshop here? And we want to teach people how to protect drains and how to sample drains and using supplies from Home Depot. And so the Home Depot people thought that was cool. And they even brought out their hot dog stand. Remember, Home Depot used to have hot dogs, I think before COVID. And they had their bleachers there, and they had, one of those Home Depot workshops.
Right.
It was a Stormwater Awareness Week workshop. So that was Kevin and your dad, Mike. They were always doing stuff like that. But yeah, he was a true voice of stormwater. Other people in that video, Some of the viewers might have saw the young lady that got pushed out of the way by Kevin. That's actually Rebecca. It's Rebecca, who's been the host on a lot of these workshops, and she's actually the main organizer of our event. And there were other employees in there too. So it was before your time.
Yep. Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. And so let's talk though. Training is a big thing when it comes to the construction general permit. It's something that the permit requires. It has become kind of just a culture of the permit. And we're seeing it even in the new 2022 CGP. And Matt, I know you've gone through and highlighted some of the places in the permit where training is required.
Yeah.
What are some of the places you've seen?
Yeah, and just so the folks, if they happen to have the permit, can follow along, we're in roughly pages 31 to 41 of the order. We're going to hit the fact sheet for a few pages. We'll be in attachment D for a page or two, and probably G and H, just FYI. But regarding training for the 2022, there's definitely a number of people that need to be trained. One of them will be delegated inspectors. QSPs themselves are going to need some additional training, along with LRPs and certain folks who are just on-site trained specifically with BMP implementation. So what do you think about that, John?
Yeah, and the permit talks about having trained personnel for BMP implementation, and it's listed right alongside of having to stockpile these things.
Right.
So it doesn't go into much more detail there. Now, Matt, you go on a lot of job sites, so you see people out there who are doing the day-to-day operation. Are they, in your opinion, well prepared to implement BMPs?
I would say it's about 50-50. Usually they're well prepared if we prepare them, to get ready. But most people, I would say, probably not. They have a general idea. They're not totally non-compliant. They're not malicious about it. But yeah, at best 50-50.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So I think the thinking here the water board's trying to achieve is, okay, so you've got these 3 pallets of fiber roll. Is there anybody that actually knows how to install it?
Right.
And so it's calling that out, saying you have to have trained personnel. Now, there's a lot that goes with training. Yeah, I mean, it just says here, trained personnel.
Right.
But that means actually doing the training.
Yeah, that means us coming out and probably doing a couple hours of training, actually walking you through the site, how BMPs are actually installed, silt fences, fiber rolls, for instance, they need to be installed in a specific manner. And so, yeah, it takes a bit of time. And you also have to have someone who's willing to learn and who takes it serious, because most people tend not to take BMPs all that serious.
Yeah, and then if you're training them, you got to document it.
That's right.
Otherwise, it never happened, right?
That's right. Yeah, the CGP actually calls for training records, and a lot of times, if you do get inspected by, say, a regional inspector, they'll ask you for a training list, that you've trained people and it's been documented, and they'll want to see it.
Right. And on page 31 of the order, right below that same reference where it says trained personnel and stockpiled BMPs, basically, it talks about a concept we've been talking about this week, BAT, BCT. But then at the end, it says, and additional training needed for the QSP, legally responsible person, or designated persons on site.
Right.
Now, this is in the context of BAT, BCT. So although it doesn't go into detail about what's really intended here, just based on the context, I have to believe it's like, okay, BMPs are always changing. There's new technologies coming out. So this week we talked about passive treatment. Well, if you're going to use passive treatment, you need to make sure everyone, all the way from the LRP down to the person implementing it, is trained.
Right.
And that I believe that's what that is referring to there.
Yeah, it's almost as if we're used to just going out and training one or two laborers, you know, who are identified as a delegated inspector. But this almost leaves the impression that we should have the entire group, from the superintendent to the LRP to the smallest guy on the totem pole, and we train them all together seemingly.
Yeah. All right. The next one we see is actually an attachment D now, and this is kind of going hand in hand with the order. So in the order, it made reference to having stockpiled materials, but in attachment D, which is where all the BMPs are housed now in the permit, it says that you have to have year-round trained persons able to deploy the product under the direction of the qualified SWPPP practitioner.
Right.
And that's all of it except sprayed on. They do make a distinction saying, well, you know, sprayed on. Of course, you know, we can understand that. That's usually a contractor, right?
Sure.
They're coming out with what? A truck.
Yeah, truck, hydro spray.
Bags of
Yeah.
it. So they're not expecting you to have the bags of hydraulic mulch stockpiled on site.
Right. It's just that general stuff, the fiber roll, the silt fence, maybe some additional track out rock piles, that sort of thing. But what's interesting is just a little FYI, when we bounce between the order and the fact sheet and then the attachments, usually the order is just a sort of broad brush overview of what the attachments go into. So you should always look to the attachment after you read the order, because there will be fine details that the order doesn't list. So that's just a little FYI for you there.
Right. Okay, so the next training we see is also in the order. It's back to the order.
Yeah, page 33.
And I think we'll see mention of this in attachment D as well. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in both, but it's talking about spill and leak prevention.
Right.
Now, even under the 09 permit, the old permit, which a lot of projects are going to stay under it, right?
For another 2 years.
Yeah. We often said there were two BMPs that no one implemented. One was trash bins, right?
Right.
Yeah. Nobody covers trash bins, right?
Hardly ever.
Yeah. And then the other one was this specific requirement to have personnel that are signed and trained for spill and leak prevention.
Right.
Now, we might do some general training of personnel, but I think sometimes we do not hone in on this specific requirement, or not sometimes, many times, most times,
right.
We don't.
Yeah.
How can spill training happen on a site? What's a practical way you might even tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, there's something that we call kick the can or kick the bucket.
Kick the bucket.
Yeah, essentially, you know, it's sort of a mock thing, but I mean, you don't have to fill it up with water, but sometimes we fill it up with water, kick it over, and then say, hey, this is oil or gasoline or grease or what have you. What would you guys do? And we see what the guys will do, but hopefully we'll train them, because they tend to not know exactly what to do.
Yeah, it's very effective. You kick it over. In fact, usually we'll try to pick a place that's kind of vulnerable, right? Upgrading of a nearby storm drain inlet or something. We'll kick it over. And one, it's helpful to see what 5 gallons of spilled material actually looks like.
For sure.
And then when we say, all right, you came out and you discovered this, what do you do? And somebody invariably will say, go get the spill kit. You say, great, go do it.
What is it? Who is in charge?
You get this deer in the headlights look, right? Everybody's like, I don't know. And if you get that, you know, okay, this training is important, because if this was a real spill, we'd be losing valuable time. People don't know where the spill kit's at.
That's right. And the spill kit, you know, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be, this is probably a little too simple, but it can be everything from just a bucket, you know, and a shovel to, you know, they have spill kits that you can buy online with absorbent materials and all kinds of stuff. But at the very least, you need to have a trained personnel with, at the very least, a bucket and a shovel. And it's also important to train someone who's for sure going to be there on site all the time. I tend to try to train superintendents to be in charge of the spill kit, because I tend to think that they'll be on site more often than not. But that's a little bit of a tricky thing, is making sure you train the right person.
Yeah, and I would train multiple people.
Oh yeah, good point, for sure.
And then it's just kind of nice to walk them through that process, because as they go through it, you can see where the gaps in knowledge are. So maybe they know where the spill kit is, but they don't know who to notify.
Right.
Or we're not thinking through, okay, we got a spilled area, but maybe we should provide an exclusion zone to keep people from driving through it. And then after you clean it up, all right, what do you do with the absorbent? The used absorbent? Throw it in the trash, right? No,
not necessarily.
And so in about 20 minutes, you can do a very effective spill training and really help your team know the practical application of it.
Right, because as we can see, or we won't see here today, but when it comes to non-visible pollutant sampling, there is a little clause in there that says if you can get on top of it quick enough and mitigate that spill, that will prevent you from having to sample.
Yeah.
And so a spill kit is really important for not only the small things, but the larger things too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, good. So next area.
Delegated inspector, bottom of page 38 of the order. This is quite possibly the biggest change for us QSPs.
Oh yeah.
The 2022. But yeah, there's all kinds of new things that we got to do for these delegated inspectors.
Yeah, earlier this week in another workshop, we were sharing how many QSPs there are and how many construction sites there are. You know, this was a number I got from the water board in April, I think, of this year. So that at that time, there were 13,500 more or less active construction sites. And as far as active QSPs, only 2,200.
Yeah.
And so what's that mean? That means we are ready, as allowed by the 09 permit, for using delegated inspectors.
Right.
And Matt, I know you work with a lot of delegated inspectors.
Yeah, that's a big, and a lot of probably QSP outfits offer what's known as an oversight inspection, where basically we train a person on site. They become a delegated inspector. They work under our license. We train them, monitor, supervise, help them in every capacity. And they do usually 3 out of the 4 weeks of inspections. And it's a huge cost savings for contractors. And it also helps us out as QSPs if we're a bit swamped. You know, it's hard to do weekly inspections sometimes. So it really is quite a beneficial thing if implemented properly.
Yeah, and you know, there's pros and cons to using delegated inspectors, as you and I have discussed many times. You know, we got an online audience. We don't normally have that during our podcast. I bet you we got some individuals out there who have some experience using delegated inspectors, maybe good and bad experiences. Now, don't name any names or company names, okay? But anybody want to share your experience with using delegated inspectors? Maybe some lessons learned? Unmute yourself if you'd like to talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. Anybody? I know we're calling on you cold, but I got a few people out there that know something about delegated inspectors. So if you'd like to share, let us go ahead and unmute.
I'll go first.
Just as a little.
All right, go for it. Who's talking to us?
This is Gretchen.
Okay, Gretchen, and then we'll take Carolyn next.
Okay. My issues with delegated inspectors, especially if you're using, say, somebody employed by the contractor, is they're not as diligent because they understand that anything they point out costs them money to fix. So we don't use delegated inspectors unless they are employed by my company for professional liability.
For sure.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely. Absolutely. And we've heard that same comment many other times. We ourselves have observed that sometimes when the contractor is doing the QSP work or the delegated inspector work, it's sometimes like the fox watching the hen house on that. Now, there are good contractors out there that do a very decent job. I'm not saying there aren't. But there is that little tug of war, right? You got this tug of war. where, as Gretchen was saying, you have a financial interest. You also have a time interest. You know, they have lots of other things to do. They fully know what has to be accomplished that day. And so they might be a little hesitant to bring it up with their superintendent or their boss. Right. Going, by the way, we got some silt fence that needs repair, you know. Yeah. And then their boss probably has no qualms about telling him what he thinks or she thinks about it, right?
Yeah, this is it's a balancing act for sure. And there's even, you know, in the new 22, the water board tries to address that specifically with delegated inspectors. If like, say, I as a QSP don't think that they're up to the task, then we have to find someone else. But yeah, if you can't find someone that you can trust with your license, then it might just have to be you. Yeah. You know,
Carolyn, you had some thoughts on delegated inspectors.
Yeah. Excuse me. I missed the first couple minutes also, and I didn't get the introduction of your guest. So
it's Matt Lewis. Matt Lewis is my SWPPP Radio host. He actually is the host of the show, and my name's John Teravskis. So thank you.
Thank you. How do you do? We have a lot of delegates, which that's going to have to change now. I personally, as a QSP, I think that it's been abused a lot of times. And, you know, if I do something wrong, if I'm unethical or whatever, that could come back and get my license or whatever. But these delegates sometimes don't have enough skin in the game. And we also hire contractors, and usually they're QSPs and QSDs. We don't worry too much about them. They do a pretty good job. We're trying to get our own people all certified. And, you know, the big problem is these underlying certifications that take, you know, more time and everything. So
yeah. Well, yeah, you're very right on there, Carolyn. You know, when it comes to these delegated inspectors, getting them trained is always a challenge. Now in the new permit, the water board is spelling out the training, exactly what it needs to look like. And there's going to be a process to go through. It's two-part, right, Matt? Yeah. The first part is
it's an online thing.
We don't know that yet, right? But we're suspecting it might be.
Right.
It's called foundational training.
Foundational training from the water board itself.
Yeah. In fact, more specifically, it's the construction general permit training team that is, according to the permit, has been assigned this responsibility to come up with this foundational training. Now, some of our listeners may be familiar with who they are, as others are not. Basically, they're a group of individuals that have been invited to participate in this committee by the water board. The committee is comprised of consultants, municipalities, other regional board staff, and so there's a mix of and even contractors, and there's a mix of people represented from the entire construction general permit program and those that are under it. And their whole aim is to put together the educational programs needed for the permit. So one of their first jobs, 13 years ago, was to develop the QSP-QSD program. And more recently, they did the reissuance review that people are going to have to take. Yeah. But according to the permit, one of their next jobs is to develop this foundational training. Right. Now, I agree with you. I kind of think it's going to be online.
Yeah. I just did the reissuance for my QSP license, and it was online. It was 3 or 4 hours, and it basically went through the whole permit. So we kind of anticipate that something similar like that might come down the pike.
I kind of think they're going to maybe reuse that, right? Repurpose that training. Yeah, that might be something, or at least good. Some of it certainly would be applicable to these delegated inspectors. So, you know, I think we don't know what it'll look like. It could be just an outline they give us and say, here's your talking points. Right. I got a feeling it's going to be more than that. Yeah. And also, I really have to believe that they're contemplating using smarts to be able to document these, because if you read the permit, these different players involved in a SWIP, everybody from the LRP, duly authorized representatives, QSDs, QSPs, and trained delegates have to be identified by SWIP amendments,
Right.
COIs. In fact, even this morning, I got an email from SMART saying, you've been designated as a QSD on this project. Well, that's not something new I've never seen from SMART. So I got a feeling that now when we enter in our delegated inspectors, SMART is going to track that, and it's also going to track if they've taken that foundational training.
Right.
Now I'm speculating. I'm looking into the future. I don't know this for sure.
Right.
But I would not be surprised.
Right. And we're hoping that all these sort of little implementations will add a little more of an air of responsibility to delegated inspectors. And, you know, if they see their name on SMARTs kind of thing, we're hoping that it will make up for, as our last listener just mentioned, is we have serious troubles with finding competent people who don't just pencil whip these reports. And so we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, it's a real concern.
So you got this foundational training, but then you have a second part, which is site-specific training. Now, Matt, on a given site, what does the delegated inspector need to know about that site?
Well, practically everything about it, but at the very least, erosion and sediment control, runoff and runoff control, non-storm water. He needs to obviously pay attention to all his DIs. There's good housekeeping.
He needs to know where the DIs are.
Yeah, he needs to know. He needs to be familiar with the SWIP. You know, the list is rather extensive.
The pH pen,
pH sampling,
like what model are you actually using?
Right.
How to calibrate it, how to use it.
Right, because the new permit actually requires sampling a lot more information regarding the equipment, how often it's calibrated, the pre-calibration before the sample. So it's a lot more information that we are going to have to start providing.
And then some site-specific things that a lot of people don't think about is how are the inspections documented? What forms are you using? Or in the case of many people like us, we're not using paper forms.
Right.
So how do you use that electronic form?
Right.
How do you enter it?
Yep.
What do we expect to be entered?
Right. Yeah, because now pictures are going to be required, which was a luxury in the 09 that many of us took advantage of. But now we have to have visual documentation for all kinds of things in the new permit.
And you get all sorts, you know, some people are very comfortable with technology, and then we have a few.
Right, got some of those old school cats who prefer the paper forms. We still have some guys who do paper forms, and we're always having to catch up. We think they're not doing their reports. And it's hard to monitor because who knows, maybe they're just pencil whipping the report, you know, 5 weeks in a row or whatever. And so there's a lot of changes coming.
Which the QSP now, under the 2022 CGP, has to visit the site monthly.
Right.
Now, we've had that as part of our oversight program for a long time. And that is not only to just check the site for compliance and BMPs, but it's also to give you an opportunity to provide additional informal training.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because often I'll train monthly, you know, there's always something that you could point out to the superintendent or the guys on site, you know, and if you're doing any sort of training, you should document that because it's required. And, you know, it's just something that we should practice regularly.
Yeah. All right. Good. So that's the delegated inspector, and we're thinking maybe there will probably be 4 hours or so for foundational training, and then to do a good job for site-specific, at least an hour, maybe 2.
Probably 2, because it takes about an hour to sort of work through their section of the permit, and then you usually want to walk the site, do an inspection with them, and you know, so it's about a 2 hour.
And a half hour probably just to do the instruments. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, trying to teach them, you know, how to work the app and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it takes time.
So those who are budgeting for this, they need to realize there's going to need to be a little bit more effort going into the training. I know we recently updated our proposals because we realized that this training was going to be more robust and take more time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Great. Now, the permit also goes into some more detail as far as what specifically we're training both QSPs and delegate inspectors on. And that is that you have to have protocols for your sampling. You have to have information about how to sample, what to do with those samples, for like non-visible pollutant sampling. When it comes to non-visible pollutant sampling, what are some of the things that a delegated inspector or even a QSP is going to need to know about?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, they're going to need to know, number one, what non-stormwater discharges are, which a lot of times we don't.
Or when a spill happened, they may or may not have been present when the spill occurred.
Probably not. More often than not, I would say people stumble upon spill or the evidence of a spill.
And then they'll need to know, where they're sampling and also what bottles they're going to be having to collect into, because
very specific.
Yeah, depending on the analysis you have to run, very different bottles are going to be
different bottles, and you have to have certain amounts. You don't want to have too much of it, or obviously too less.
And then holding times,
right?
Like if it's bacteria, if the porta potty went over, and your indicator analyte is bacteria or fecal coliform, it's got to be at the laboratory within 6 hours, maybe 4 to 6 hours. It's got to be at the laboratory.
And a lot of times the labs are not just down the street. I think our closest lab is over an hour away or so, give or take, where we tend to take our stuff. So
all of this has got to be put into some sort of procedure,
for sure,
so that if this does become a reality, your delegated inspector knows what to do.
Right.
Knows where to go, where to take the samples.
Yeah, it's a very time sensitive thing.
All right, good. Now, a big area, of course, is QSPs, QSDs, right? That was new in the 09 permit. It was a new concept that came out. You and I've spent some podcasts already talking about QSPs, QSDs. And so maybe what we don't focus on so much is the entry requirements for training. Of course, you have to have your prerequisites and you have to take the 2 or 3 day class and all that.
Have a few years under your belt.
But the water board, a big focus in this new permit was addressing some concerns. And we've heard multiple regional board individuals say that a big concern of theirs were people who got these credentials and just were not operating as one. Now, what does this permit say about what we might call bad QSPs, QSDs?
Yeah, bad QSPs, they can, number one, they usually get warned, and they can actually pull their license.
Yeah.
It's, I'm trying to remember what they call it.
Suspension. It can be suspension.
And a
rescission is, it's a 2-step process. Right. So the first one would be suspension. And from what I've heard in the road shows with the water board, it's meant to be a progressive thing.
Right.
So yeah, like you said, probably a verbal first, and then maybe a suspension, and then finally rescission, meaning stripped it away from you.
Right. And when I started reading this, it's very threatening, seemingly, in the language. And John made a good point that the water board isn't headhunting. Right, they're trying to, I guess, give themselves some teeth, for us QSPs who are just all too comfortable with pencil whipping. And I'll just stop short. I don't want to get into all the potential ways that QSPs are working the system, but there's a lot of ways to do it. And we don't think that they're going to suspend without due cause, without an ongoing history of clear negligence.
Yeah. But there are times that is the case.
Absolutely.
And so if they do suspend, what are they going to require before you can get back into the program?
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
It's on page 41 of the order, if our audience is following us at the bottom there.
Let's see. I'm having trouble reading with this highlight. Oh, here we are. Okay, suspend. Okay, quote. The State Water Board Executive Director or Regional Water Board Executive Officer may suspend any QSD or QSP certification and require that additional training be completed as a condition of reinstatement if the executive director or executive officer finds in writing that the QSD or QSP in the course of acting as a QSD or QSP at one or more sites lacked adequate knowledge or training to perform duties required by the general permit.
Right.
And it goes on, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
And it doesn't exactly say what that training's going to be.
Right.
It doesn't define that. Now, I know before COVID was happening, Matt, I had received several inquiries from contractors that the water board, or I should say the regional board, had shut them down and had given them a list of trainer of records, who are those who give the QSP,
Right.
QSD
John
classes.
is the trainer of record.
And they required that they go get, I forget now, either 2 hours or 4 hours, I forget the amount of time, but there was a designated amount of hours of training they had to get from a trainer of record, and had to have that TOR, the trainer of record, submit documentation of who attended and what was in the training,
Right.
in order for them to be able to continue construction,
Right.
to get the cease and desist order lifted from
And
them.
honestly, I think that's a pretty light punishment, because being negligent when it comes to stormwater is a pretty serious offense, my opinion.
Yeah.
Considering this is water. So I think they get off pretty light, especially if they got you as a teacher, John.
Well, and I've talked to other trainer of records out there, and they said, yeah, I was contacted by people too, and I gave a few classes myself. So I know they were calling various trainer of records to get the class, and then so I think that's kind of what we're going to see here for QSPs, QSDs. That was directed towards the contractor or the discharger, but now it's towards the QSP.
Right.
And the QSP, if they're found not doing their job, or we talked about earlier, a delegated person, guess whose responsibility it is to make sure the delegated inspector's doing their job?
Right, it's that QSP, because a delegated inspector will be working under the license of a QSP.
Yeah.
So a delegated inspector, if they're continually negligent, it can fall back onto the QSP and it can threaten your license.
Or you might find yourself having to have some supplemental education, right?
In
order to continue your
right.
license. Yeah.
That's right.
So really important now to take it very seriously. Make sure your delegated inspectors are doing their job. Make sure you as QSP are doing your job to avoid some of this corrective action.
Yeah.
I guess I want to circle back to another change in this permit regarding QSPs and QSDs, as we talked about these underlying credentials. But now the water board's opening up a whole new opportunity. There's actually a couple, like a QSP, for example, can now go to a college or tech school that has a construction management program with erosion and sediment control instruction as a part of that.
Right.
So they can count that. But the water board is also saying that they will consider other programs that are presented to the water board and to the construction general permit to meet this underlying credentials. So here in a little bit of time, I don't know, maybe next year or two, we'll start to see programs come out that are instructional, that are, and maybe instead of becoming a CPESC, you could do this, or instead of becoming a SISEP, you could do this.
Right.
And I'm excited about that because I used to be an instructor for one of those certifications, and we were told basically when we did the review to say, this is just a review class. We expect you to already know this information.
Right.
And I remember when I took my review class, I'm like,
I don't know.
I don't know this.
Yeah. How are you supposed to know this without taking a class?
Maybe I was just a good test taker.
Yeah.
I passed the exam, but we expect you to know this. And in fact, they would even say that the stuff on the exam, that we're not even covering all the stuff on the exam.
Right.
And so that's always been a bit of a frustration of mine personally. And I've also heard water board staff express the same frustration, that there are not as many options as we would like to see, where someone who truly doesn't really know this industry can go and learn.
Right.
And get the education and the experience and the training they need to learn.
Yeah.
And so I applaud the water board for putting this in. I am really hopeful that we see some programs come out
Yeah.
that are very down to earth. Here's how you do an inspection.
Right.
Here's how these BMPs get installed, and even have them doing it.
Yeah.
Here's how to write a SWP, and have them write one. You know,
Right.
have them go out and do a real inspection, and somebody who's overseeing that work and training them and
Right.
maybe grading it.
Yeah.
And then instead of maybe a certification, you get a diploma. You know, when you've completed this course and you've shown that you know how to do this. So we'll see what happens in our industry. But this is I really like this in this new permit. And
Yeah, me
I think
too.
we're going to see some stuff come out of that.
Yeah, I think this might, help with the lack of QSDs in the field. Maybe if there's more options, it might, help get a few more QSDs.
You know what? Let's hear from our audience
Please.
again. What do you think about this new option that the water board has put to meet the underlying certifications? What are you hoping to see? Maybe do you like this? Anybody want to unmute? Go ahead. I got a text or a chat here. Yes, I support making this industry move more able to accept new people into it. Yeah. It gives more options, certainly. And anybody? Walter, I see you unmuted. Do you want to talk?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, I really value the focus that you put on the things that really make a difference, especially on the training in the field, on the delegates and those who are actually the hands-on. So, I mean, I would expect, at least when I get a chance to go to the field, I'm pretty much locked up here in headquarters, Sacramento. But I definitely look forward to see that the delegates really get a hands-on, get a good feeling for what it does, what it takes to actually, hey, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. I can get this thing done right. I can anticipate, and I know exactly what to do and how to prepare the site so I don't get surprises and the job moves smoothly. So thank you so much for this week. It's been phenomenal.
All right. Well, you're welcome. And thank you for your comments. And yeah, I have to agree with Walter. I'm really looking forward to this because, if the water board is going to hold QSPs and QSDs accountable, with a suspension and rescission, I really like how it's been balanced with, but now we're going to give opportunities to really learn this information. And so that's great. I see another comment here in our chat. Let me scroll up there so I can read that. Let's see, there were a couple here. Yes, I have a problem with PEs and PGs, professional engineers and professional geologists, not having underlying inspections. In my experience, their education and professional qualifications do not equal stormwater knowledge in many cases. Yes, and I think that's true. In many cases, it does not. I have heard inspectors comment on the same about that. Now, there are certain PEs who are more than qualified and they do a phenomenal job. So it's definitely not the whole group. But I think with any segment, there are people who have sufficient background and experience and education, and there are others who don't.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for that comment. Juan, I see your hand raised. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, I think it's great that they're trying to standardize, the training and making sure that everybody is trained to the same level. And I can't agree more with Carolyn on this. I am a PE and I am an engineer. However, I have about 5 to 10 years of actual on-site inspection on SWPPP. So when I start hearing that just because you have a PE or you're an engineer, you're automatically a QSP, QSD, I was completely against it. right? And I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers on engineers, but hey, the fact that you have a P doesn't guarantee you, or doesn't give exactly what Carolyn says there, doesn't give the background knowledge, right? There's a lot of Ps that I know, they don't visit job sites. I mean, because that's not perhaps part of your responsibility unless you're in construction management and you're DRE. Otherwise, you never visited a job. So what gives you that knowledge? I mean, unfortunately, it's experience, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's a great comment. Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. I thought I saw Chris Brown muting and unmuting. Does that mean, Chris, you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't want to. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm parked on the side of the road. You know, I just I think you'll know what I mean, and I don't have a great solution for it, but I think the easiest way to put it is there's a big difference between taking a QSP class and taking the SESWI and even the reissuance review and passing online open book exams and the actual experience needed to do this job in the field. And I worry about people as they, complete these classes and then they go off, because there is so much information and detail to process. It's a bit overwhelming. And I feel I don't have any problem telling people sometimes, like, look, once you pass all this, you should probably work with someone that's already been doing it so that you can, shadow with them or something like that. It'd be pretty difficult to be compliant just in your role, much less the site being compliant, but being compliant and fulfilling your duties as a QSP or a QSD if you're just going from the classroom right out to the field on your own. So, try to work with someone else if you can.
Yeah,
great point.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I always say when it comes to any sort of degree, a degree has literally just taught you how to learn. Yeah. And once you get that degree, then your education really starts.
Yeah, and I've proctored one of these underlying credentials. I've certainly, taught many QSPs and QSDs, and my observation is some people are just good test takers. They just know how to study. They know how to look at, they know how to take a test.
Right.
I have seen very competent people struggle on these exams. People who I know for sure they know this information inside and out. In fact, are maybe even more qualified than me. But they're just not good test takers.
Yeah.
And so I've often thought, where's the equity in that? Just because a certain organization has a very onerous exam, is that really a true sense of someone's maybe qualifications, really, of how well they would perform in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So see other comments here. Looking forward to, I think, this new program. We have some civil EITs that just don't have the certs, but we would like to get them into becoming qualified. Let me scroll down here and look at other comments here. All right, I agree. Ruffle away, someone's encouraging us. Even the SESWI instruction is quite robust. Yeah. You may have my support too. QSDs without hands-on experience would not be adept or adapt to perform the field duties. So true. Some people know how to take good tests. All right, so good. Anyone else? We got a few moments here. You want to comment on some of the education requirements? This has been great. I love getting the input from everyone. Awesome. We should do these live SWPPP radios more often.
Yeah, it is really fun to talk to people.
All right. So we talked about this reissuance training a little bit. This is something that is also required in the 2022 CGP, or required of the 2022 CGP. So QSPs and QSDs who are existing QSPs and QSDs, basically, Matt, they have to take their reissuance review by when? Do you remember?
Oh, it was, geez, I took mine right away because my license was right. It was when before your license expires, I think it is. Mine was like the next day.
Yeah.
I got the email and I was like, oh.
Yeah, so that's exactly why. Yeah, you have to take it before your QSP, QSD needs to be renewed.
Right.
And it's a 2-year process, and some people might have been like you the very next day.
Right.
Other people might be 2 years from now. The water board's really recommending that if this is your field of practice and you're going to be working with sites under this permit, do it as soon as possible. And I agree.
Yep.
I agree. It's the process was kind of involved, wasn't it? It was 3 to 4 hours.
That's right. It was like, if I remember, 4 or 5 sections. It was about an hour or so a piece. And you had to listen to the presentation, and then you have to answer every question correctly. But of course, if you don't get the question correct, you have to stay on the question until you get it correct. So it's 100%
There
pass
were
rate. multiple choice.
So usually if you had 4 or 5 tries, you eventually get the right answer, right?
Yeah, you'll eventually get it right by process of elimination.
And you know what? There were a couple of questions that I had to try multiple times.
Yeah, but as our previous listener, said, it's, open book. And it is a little bit of that struggle, how much is this seeping into our mind? Are we retaining it, or are we just flipping through the order and finding the answers we need?
Yeah, and I see a comment here from someone saying it took longer than 4 hours. Actually, it did. Me too. I think the actual video time is slightly under 4 hours, but those quizzes actually take a little bit of time to go through it. And I'm thinking 5 to 6 hours is what you should.
Yeah, it's almost a whole day. Yeah, designated to take.
Yeah, I split mine up into two separate sessions.
Luckily, you can do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great, Matt. I think we're just about out of time. There are other special situations where training is needed. Just to alert our audience. So attachment F for active treatment systems. They're not new requirements. They were there previously. There are training requirements there for someone using an active treatment system. Attachment G for passive treatment. There's actually requirements there that someone who's employing that technology needs to be trained. And surprisingly, last session we talked about TMDL's attachment H. This is a strange one.
Yep.
There are a lot of strange things about attachment H. Especially as we mentioned in the LA area. Sorry if you're from LA. That's why I say it's good to be from NorCal, right? Especially when it comes to TMDL.
Region 5.
Bacteria, if you're in a place that has a bacteria BMP, there is a requirement to have training that the qualified SWPPP practitioner conducted training for the construction site staff on bacteria. Now, it doesn't go in and says what that needs to be. I think maybe that's washing your hands after you leave the porta potty.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
No rocking it if your friend's inside the porta potty.
What to do if it tips over.
Right.
You can use your imagination for what that bacteria training is all about. But sorry, if you're from LA, you might be. Yep. Of course, maybe that is appropriate. If you're from LA, you should be trained on bacteria training. I don't know. Anyways, check that out if you are from that area. All right. Well, this has been great. It's been wonderful having you guys be a part of this, and also a part of Stormwater Awareness Week. There's still 2 more workshops today to take advantage of, and of course, they're all being recorded and they'll all be online to watch in the future or to recommend to a colleague. So thank you everyone for being a part of the SWPPP Radio. All right.